Good evening. We're about to start chapter 27 in our book, talking about the present adverbial participles. I have decided to use the older terminology, present, instead of imperfective. So let's call it present adverbial participles. And I'll leave the exegetical insight for you to read on your own so that we have more time. But the overview says we're going to learn that the present participle is formed with the present tense stem, plus a connecting vowel, plus a participle morpheme, plus the case ending. We learned that last week in the overview. And then to translate it, you must first discover the participle's aspect, voice, and meaning. You can usually translate it with the ing form of the verb, sometimes with the keywords while or because. That would form then an adverbial phrase. And he'll give examples as we get into it. 27.1, the summary of the imperfective or present, the present adverbial participle. The present participle is built on the present tense stem of the verb. He repeated that. And it describes a continuous action. Now that is its aspect. It's continuous, just like the present, what's the word I'm searching for?
The present tense verb?
Yeah, the present tense, but it's the mood.
Active?
No, that's the voice. I just can't, it'll come to me. Okay, but you remember the aspect is the kind of action, not the time of the action. So it's a continuous aspect. It will often be difficult to carry this nuance into your translation, but this must be the foremost consideration in your mind. Everything else pales in light of the aspect of the participle. C, if the participle is active or middle, that's the voice, the word it modifies does the action of the participle. If the participle is passive, the word it modifies receives the action of the participle. That's just like verbs. And D, in this chapter, you're learning the adverbial participle, which means that the action described by the participle is related to the verb. In chapter 29, we'll talk about adjectival participles, but for this chapter and the next, it will be adverbial participles. There's a footnote 1.
Okay.
I'm not sure I want to read this, but
I think it's useful.
okay.
Particularly that part that says the term present participle.
Why don't you read it then
a
for?
serious disservice because the student may infer that the participle describes an action occurring in the present time, which it may not.
Yeah. Now, well, let me come. Yeah.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about
Because
that.
if the present participle is connected to, see, participles are connected to a verb, a finite verb, they call it. And that finite verb may be an aorist, for instance.
Right.
But the way that the participle works, if it's a present participle, it occurs, the action of it occurs at the same time as the main verb. So if the main verb is aorist, that would be past time. So it's concurrent with the
it's really similar in the English in this sense. If I said John was reading while John was reading his book.
Yeah.
No, that's well, John
while reading.
Jumping.
Yeah.
Back yesterday when John, no, this
While John was reading, something else happened.
Yeah. So he was reading in the past time.
Right. But it was a continuing, ongoing action in the past.
That's right.
When something else happened.
Something like similar to the imperfect tense.
Yeah.
Indicative mood is the word I was searching
Oh,
for.
I want to use it in an adverbial way, which would be better.
Okay.
If I said, while jumping quickly,
Yeah,
yesterday while jumping quickly,
yeah,
it's still, it's an example of a
Yeah.
present tense participle, being used
Yeah.
to modify a verb
yeah,
that happened in the past. So,
Yeah.
Okay.
okay, so that's not too difficult to avoid confusion, even if you do use the terminology present participle. It's just that the participle takes on the same time element. It's relative to the main verb.
I could think of another way you could do it too. And this is jumping quicker then, you could say while Jack was jumping over the candlestick, he caught his pants on fire and got burned.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Next page.
Yes.
The adverbial participle is usually translated as an adverbial clause using the word while or as or when or because. There's other words that you can use to translate participles. You can use the ing form of the participle. That's kind of the bare basic way to translate a participle using the ing form. In translation, if appropriate, preface the translation of the participle with the adverb while or because, if it fits the context. Footnote 2. As you advance in your understanding of the language, you will find that there are other ways to translate the participle, but at your present stage, this practice is recommended. For you grammarians, it should be noticed that if you do use the because, then in English you end up with an adverbial clause, not a participial clause. Okay. Okay, an example.
Okay.
Anthropos apethana didaskon. There's the participle, and that's present active, participle, nominative, singular. Nominative masculine singular. So it's okay. It's not an articular participle. There's no article right in front of it, so it's an adverbial, not an adjectival participle.
Okay.
That's the way you tell the difference. But the man died. You could simply say teaching the koine or teaching koine, or you can use the while as an adverbial phrase. The man died while teaching koine. Okay, died is an aorist. That's a good example. So the while teaching says that the teaching occurs at the same time as the man died, which is a past thing. So that's all that the present participle does. It's an action that occurs at the same time as the main verb.
Yeah, and that's fine. In some cases, like a trivial one like this, while isn't necessary, but
no,
this
it's not.
is the standard English construct for making it.
Yeah. So either way, if it makes sense to do it without the while, you can do that.
Yeah.
He was currently teaching the language when he died happy. Okay. Even though the participle is adverbial, it still agrees with a noun or pronoun in case, number, and gender. And ha anthropos is nominative singular masculine. So is the ending omega nu, nominative singular masculine.
Okay.
For example, if the noun is anthropos, the participle would be didaskon, nominative singular masculine. Most adverbial participles are nominative, agreeing with the subject of the verb, but that's not always the case. The participle might be connected with the direct object, then it would be accusative.
Okay.
The adverbial participle is always anarthrous, meaning not preceded by the article. So here's our chart. Present tense stem. In this case, didask, connecting vowel, omicron or epsilon. But now that omicron or epsilon connecting vowel in the case of the example he gave was swallowed up by the omega.
Yeah, right.
And the new tau, which is a participle morpheme, the tau got eliminated because the tau can't stand at the end, and there is no case ending for participle in singular masculine. So the omicron there got lengthened to an omega, and the tau dropped off. So pistuone, or in the case of didascone, in the example. Participles are formed only from four morphemes, which undergo some variation in the different tenses and genders. They must be memorized. Nu tau is the usual active morpheme. It appears as nu tau in the masculine and neuter, and is a third declension. Luontes and luonta. That's the masculine plural, nominative masculine plural, and the nominative neuter plural. But usa is the active morpheme in the feminine, footnote 3. Usa and nu tau are morphologically related. And if you want to learn why, you have to check out his book, Morphology of Biblical Greek. In the active participles, the feminine participle morpheme is always different from the masculine and neuter. The feminine participle is first declension in all tenses, whereas the masculine and neuter participle morpheme are in the third declension. Okay, there he's got them listed in the chart. The active is in the top, and the middle and passive are in the bottom. Learn to view the participle morpheme as an important indicator, much like the tense formatives. When you see an omicron nu tau case ending, you can be quite sure the word is an active participle. When you see an omicron meno or mene case ending, it's probably a middle/passive participle. I'm not sure why he says probably.
I lost where you are.
27.3.
Okay.
I just finished that.
Okay.
Okay, then next one is not imperfective, but present participle active. Seems like he's reviewing again. Present tense stem, connecting vowel, active participle morpheme, nu tau, and then case ending. He's done the same thing again, pistuontes. And then he gives us the full paradigm for the present active participle. And if you look in the first and third columns, you recognize, hopefully, the third declension endings. Remember when we first learned it, it was that he used sarks, sarkos, sarki, sarka.
This is the same paradigm he gave us.
Yeah.
Page 289. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, here's one thing that is important, I think. The paradigm for pos, which is an adjective. It's an adjective. It's a 3-1-3 adjective, meaning that the masculine and the neuter follow third declension, and the feminine follows first declension. He mentioned it when we learned that way back in chapter whatever. That's a paradigm that is useful to learn the participle endings. So I taped that into my book, so it's handy. I think it's in your cheat sheet too.
So,
That's the participle chart.
Mhm.
Um,
That's
Or do we
on,
give 6 of them?
where was in here? I
And-
saw that. Oh, here it is. It's
Okay.
under adjectives, near the upper left in the second page.
yeah, that's right. This,
5 columns, it's the
Yeah,
second from the left.
this is it here. This
Oh.
talks about adjectives, and right in the middle, the second paradigm, pos.
Yeah.
Pasa and pon.
Okay.
So that's the one to keep in mind when you're looking for present participles.
It's similar, but it's not really. the
Not
same.
identical,
It's not
no,
the
but
same.
there's reasons for the dissimilarity.
Okay.
Okay, 6 forms. He mentioned this last chapter. One of the keys to learning the participle is to memorize the main 6 forms of each participle as listed below. And the reason he only lists those 6 is because that's enough to figure out the whole paradigm if you know the case endings of the adjective for pos.
What?
You've got a question.
You said because if you know these 6, you know the paradigm because of pos?
Well, because pos gives you the endings for all the rest of them, the dative and accusative and the
Okay,
plural.
that's what the shortcut means.
Yeah,
But for these others, it's not pos, it's something else. Like for the present middle passive. Well,
oh,
not-
middle,
well,
no,
well,
that
different.
doesn't work for the middle
Yeah,
passive.
right. But it's got something else
Yeah,
that he, okay. So these are shortcuts into another form.
mhm, that's right.
Okay.
A top of page 303. If it helps, you may want to add the dative plural under the genitive singular forms as well, especially for third declension forms. That's up to you. I think it's sufficient to memorize just nominative and genitive. And then contract verbs are regular in their participial forms. The contract vowel contracts with the connecting vowel, just as it does in the indicative. Agapa plus antas. Well, you combine the alpha with the omicron, and that results in an omega. Agapontas. And you remember that chart that shows all the possible variations of contract vowels? It's in the appendix. Vowel contractions, page 418. You may need.
Okay. That's the.
It's
Just
this
trying to
one.
follow this. This is what we're getting here is the genitive singular form. Masculine and neuter. Is that, I'm just making sure I'm trying to follow this.
Yeah, okay.
That is, the ontos is.
Yeah,
genitive
ontos
singular
is-
masculine and
That's
neuter,
right.
Right?
He's
Okay.
given
Thank
an
you.
example of contraction of the agapa stem, the alpha contracted with the omicron.
Yep.
Results in omega.
Great. I'm just making sure I'm
Yeah.
tracking.
You are. And then Amy is very similar to what we just talked about. There's the full paradigm of Amy in the participle. See, the endings are so similar to the paradigm for Luo. And then going on to 27.9. Am I going too fast?
I'm not sure. Okay. I'm sorry.
Okay, if you want to look at the paradigm
What?
for Amy a little bit,
No, I'm not sure. Okay.
it's just simply the bare ending, the
not sure why, I'm sorry, I'm not sure why we're getting this for Amy. That's what I'm not,
Oh, because you'll be using that in your translation. In the exercises.
okay, it's a verb, right?
Yeah,
I'm just.
Amy is a verb,
Okay,
I
it's
mean,
just a verb, and we're just being told
I
the
am.
paradigm here.
yes.
Okay, because
It's,
we've come across this before, so we've been using Amy.
yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
But this is a participle now, based on Amy, the verb. And if you'll notice, it's
okay.
just the connecting vowel, the participle morpheme, and the case ending.
Okay, it's not being said. Translate them with the English participle being.
Yeah,
So this is not Amy.
No,
This is a participle form of Amy.
that's right.
I'm
That's right.
sorry, it's just that it didn't quite say this.
Okay, well,
I'm just kind of slow. It didn't really say that. Okay.
Amy's a verb, and these are participles based on that verb.
Okay, that's good. But really, am I wrong? This doesn't say this is the participle form of Amy.
Well, no, I
It
guess
does
it
say
didn't.
translate them with the English participle being. I guess I should know that then.
Mhm.
And I'm looking at it going, how is that Amy? It's not quite. Okay, I'm sorry.
Well, Amy means I am.
Right, but this, okay. This table here is not for Amy, it's for the participle of Amy,
Yeah,
in which we haven't had before. Okay,
no, we haven't had it before.
okay, so we're not getting Amy, we're getting the participle form of the present
Yeah.
active participle of it. Okay.
Now,
thank
if you want to look at something here, kind of a summary of Amy in the appendix, the gray edge section, page 435, he has a lot of information about that. 435.
And Amy, we need to know because
Yeah,
it's very irregular. and
it's
so we
very
need to know
irregular.
this.
It's occurs very frequently.
I'm sorry.
Verbs are always irregular.
It's
Yeah.
just, a lot of this is sort of not very contextual and it's not obvious because we've gone through a lot of different things here that seem like we're repeating stuff and it's easy to get lost.
Yeah,
That's how I feel. Oh, okay, I get it.
all right. But did you see that on page 435? That's everything you need to know about Amy. It's all the paradigms that he's collected them all together. For the indicative and the participle and the non-indicative, which we haven't yet learned. So that's information to keep handy.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're going to talk about the middle slash passive for the present participle. And he gives us in the gray shaded box the overview of it. You've got the present tense stem, lu, the connecting vowel, either omicron or epsilon, and the middle slash passive participle morpheme, which is meno or mene, and then the case ending. Now he uses the nominative plural masculine ending as an example, lu, men, oi. And he gives the full paradigm here for it. Luominus, luomenu, and so forth.
Where's the noise?
It's on 2710, where I'm looking.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Where are you reading Minoy? Are you talking about nominative plural masculine?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
It's Lu, men, plus E is Luamenoi. Shall we go on?
Oh, you're on sub 27.9.
Yeah.
Oh, you said 27.10.
Well, that's because I had thought we
Oh.
were done with 9.
Oh, okay, no, that's fine.
But he's given us in that gray shaded area,
Yep.
an example of middle/passive participle. Now he's got the full paradigm in 27.10,
Yeah, right, okay.
and no surprises there, but just notice that it's a 2-1-2 pattern instead of a 3-1-3 pattern for middle/passive.
I can say is I'm really glad I don't need to speak this language.
Yeah. Okay. Are we okay there to go
Yes.
on?
Yeah. Good.
Well, the halftime review, I think I'll skip that. You can look at it on your own if you want to. But then 2711, this gets a little practical now. Would somebody else like to read a bit?
Yeah, why don't you go?
Okay,
I'm still at this point trying to get my mind off of work and focused on here.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
2711. Initial questions. You should ask the following 3 questions of any participle before attempting a translation. What aspect? If the participle is formed on the present tense stem, then it is imperfect, then it is a present participle.
yeah.
This means that your translation should be continuous if possible. All the participles you will meet in this chapter are present. It will often be impossible to convey the full force of the participles aspect in your English translation, but you can in your preaching and teaching. I'm not sure what is meant by that.
Well, let's take an example. Let's look at that one under the bullet point, square bullet point.
Next down, okay.
John the Baptist came preaching in the desert. Now, he doesn't use the while to make it an adverbial clause. He simply has the ing form of it because it's quite clear without the while. Now, that preaching is a present participle, and it does have a continuous aspect. How can you bring out the continuous aspect in that sentence? Well, you could possibly say while he is preaching in the desert, instead of while he preaches in the desert. You remember when we studied the indicative form of the verb in the present tense? We said there's 2 ways you can translate it. I go or I am going. I preach or I am preaching. Well, here you could say, since preaching is a participle now in this example, you could expand the participle to include the subject of the participle, which is John the Baptist, and use the pronoun he while he is preaching in the desert. Or
Was, I mean.
while he was,
I mean, you got this, that's okay.
Came, that's right. Came is an aorist. So while he was preaching in the desert.
Okay,
Doesn't
I'm
that kind of give you the idea that it's not just, keeps on doing it. Crowds kept coming and he kept on preaching. So,
But I guess what makes me unsure what the point is when I see this out of context is what exactly they're trying to get at by the primary verb came and putting it into that tense. I mean, from my study of the Bible, that I know what it's really saying was John the Baptist was sent to this earth
yeah,
and he was preaching regularly, continuously in the desert.
mhm.
But but I know that from other sources, not from the way this is phrased, and that's why
Yeah.
I'm going on.
Well, he's just trying to emphasize that the aspect is the main feature of the participle rather than the time of it.
Okay. That's what I'm saying. So preaching in the desert, that part is easy to grasp. It's came.
Well, yeah, what's the point of the verb there, came?
The came is
And-
what
and-
seems awkward.
It
Well-
was God sent him, is how I'm reading
Okay.
it. He came and was doing
Yeah,
this.
it's almost like it should be was sent as opposed to came.
Well, okay.
Or
Okay.
if you use came to this earth, came to
Yeah.
this planet, came
Or-
to this world.
Or came to his ministry. I mean,
Yeah,
right?
it is like it's missing a participial phrase. I mean, excuse me, a prepositional phrase, it seems like it's missing.
Okay, came into this earth.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, perhaps, but the verb here is not part of the participle, except that the participle is related to the verb.
right, that's what I'm saying, but the verb seems like it's incomplete.
Okay,
An
maybe,
incomplete idea.
It's
There
kind
might
of
be a
o-
better
it's kind of okay. I mean,
It's okay, because we know from other places what.
I mean, I'll take a modern example without trying to be too, not only get political, but one might say, and Donald Trump came down the escalator,
Again, now
politicking.
you're sticking though with what we were already talking about, putting in a prepositional phrase to.
Well,
Yeah.
no, well, but Donald Trump came
Campaigning.
campaigning.
But then again, what you're really saying in this case, Donald Trump came to Florida or wherever.
Well, no,
It's
he was
implied,
never
but
a
it's not
politician
stated.
before, but if I were to say to people now, Donald Trump came campaigning, and in those days, we would all know when he began to campaign, the context, we would recognize that time. And so I guess that in this, if you were first century, or, you know, if you think of the context, there's a time at which John the Baptist began preaching.
Mhm.
And he came and was preaching.
Yeah.
So I mean, but I'm not sure, okay, it's okay, but I'm not sure what the full force means, because the full force is there. I don't know what he's trying to convey, like there's something missing in that English? I don't think so. That's all right.
no, in this example, maybe not, but
Okay,
there is an aspect that's more important than the time for any participle. And if you can bring it out in the explanation of the verse, fine. But it's difficult to do in English. That's all. Okay, let's go on.
voice. Number two, the voice. The voice of a participle will be either active, middle, or passive, depending on the verb's stem and participle morpheme.
Okay.
Well, that's how you form it, yes.
Mhm.
All right,
Yes, some verbs don't have an active form. Those are
yeah,
deponent.
yes, he doesn't mention that, but
Oh,
okay.
let me go back, because I had a question then too, before we got off on the other thing. It says up under aspect, this means that your translation should be continuous if possible. So what kind of a circumstance would you have where you cannot make it continuous?
I can't think of any right now. We might have some examples in our exercises.
Mhm.
Can we put that?
Yeah, we'll find out.
Often.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something
'Cause
like
that's one
that.
of
'Cause-
those things I'm going like, huh? 'Cause I,
well, it's hard to think of an English example that's not in that form. So
yeah, I was gonna say, and
you
everything
have
we've
to
said
make it a
tonight
phrase.
was like, these should be continuous. We just keep saying that over and over. So now this is the first time we go, well, maybe it's not always possible.
Well, let's wait until we get an example, but.
well, I guess that could be an example. I mean, there must be logically, there's an example, so it might
It
make
must
sense.
be, that's what I'm thinking, it must appear somewhere if he brings it up.
It seems to me like using the ing form of the participle almost
Oh, it makes it continuous. But if you
but
make-
automatically make it
But
continuous.
if you use the
Which is
phrase instead,
why-
let me give you an example. While Donald Trump stood on the stage, right, nothing continuous about
No,
that
that's
phrase.
just a.
While Donald Trump stood on the stage, his ear was shot. Now, that's a participle phrase. Did I do that right?
No,
I didn't know.
you've got a complex, you don't have a participle in that
Okay, so
sentence.
how would you make that with a phrase in the English?
While standing
No,
on
but
the
now it's
stage.
contingent, now it's
Yeah.
continuous, see. And I'm not wanting to do that.
Well, let's wait until we get examples from the book. Can we do that?
Yeah, see, I don't really know. Okay,
Because
keep
we're
going.
just kind of guessing.
27.12. Translation. Once you have answers to these questions, you can understand. I'm sorry, I missed one, didn't I?
Yeah, 3.
3, meaning. What does the lexical form of the verb mean? This includes finding the participles, case, number, and gender, so you can see which word it is modifying.
Yeah.
So in this meaning, he's saying it's not enough to know the verbal meaning. You have to understand what it's being applied
Yeah.
to.
Participles are always connected with a main verb, and the main verb has a case, number, and gender, which relates it to the subject. In the example that we were considering, John the Baptist came, the subject is John the Baptist, and came is the verb. That verb came.
But we already said, though, that the participle could be modifying an object, in which case it's going to agree with the object instead of the subject. And that's what we're talking about, right?
That's a different issue, though. Yeah, in this example, we've got the participle agreeing with the subject, John the Baptist.
Yes, but in his number 3 meaning, he's saying it's important to understand what it's modifying by the case, number, and gender.
Right.
Well, that's got to do with an object or subject. It's not a verb thing.
Yeah, because the subject of a participle is the noun that is connected with.
Oh, all right, yes, but it may not be the subject of the sentence.
No, the subject of the participle
Okay,
might be
yes,
different
might
than
be
the subject of the sentence.
Yes, okay, all right, I understand it, yes, that's right.
But also, it's connected. Adverbial participles are also related to the verb, the main verb of the sentence.
Yes,
So it's connecting a bunch of things. The participle connects with the verb and the subject.
it's interesting, he didn't mention here whether there's an article in front of the.
Well, if there's an article in
Then
front
it's
of the
adjective
participle,
or
it's not an adverbial participle, it's
Adjectival.
adjectival, yeah.
Yeah, okay,
That'll be 2 chapters from now.
okay.
Okay,
All right.
translation.
27.12, translation. Once you have answers to these questions, you can understand what the participle is saying. There are different ways to translate an adverbial participle, but the following 3 are common. Context will show you which one to use. It is easiest to translate with the ing form of the English verb.
Yeah, I want to stop you for a second. What I do in my translation, whether I do it written out or spoken out or just in my mind, my first pass is to use the ing form of the participle. Then I might polish it up a little bit and add an adverbial clause. or something else. But that helps me
Yeah.
to use the ing form first.
Okay, we talked about this example, first one
Mhm.
already.
Yeah,
Then he says, if the participle is passive, use being in the English past participle.
okay, now, English past participle, I handed out to you one time all the irregular forms I could think of English verbs. For example, go, went, gone. Or let's use, that's the most
Okay.
irregular one, but how about eat, ate, and eaten?
Yeah.
Are you with us, Ray?
Yeah, I was just looking at.
So this is formed with being and the past tense
Yeah.
form of the verb.
Yes, so the past participle is the third principal part of the English verb, eaten in the case of the verb to eat. I was eaten. Not I was eating, but I was eaten. That makes it past, a past participle. So he gives an example here. Read being shaken. So shake is the word shake, shook, and shaken. So it's a past participle, but it's a English past participle. That's the name of the English tense, but it's a Greek present participle.
We call this the past perfect in English,
N-
the
no.
form of the verb.
No, the
Shaken?
tense of the participle is
Um,
present participle.
I understand. I'm sorry. Yeah, I did, you called them first, second, third principal parts. This is not how I learned.
That's English.
Well, I understand, but I
Okay,
did not
what
learn
did you
English.
learn?
I learned present, past, and past perfect. Is that not what we're calling this? Shaken?
Yeah,
Okay,
present,
that's my
present
question,
tense.
to make sure I'm on the same page.
Okay,
'cause-
present tense, past tense, and past perfect
Okay,
tense
so we use that.
are
form.
the three principal parts
Okay, so
of
the,
the English verb.
the past perfect tense of the English verb with the being.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay,
I learned those terms too,
okay.
but collectively, they're called the principal parts of the
Okay.
verb.
Okay, that's fine. Only for English, not for other languages. What are these people doing? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Okay.
If you are struggling to translate a participle, be satisfied with using ing. Finish translating the verb and then come back and see if you want to refine your translation with the options below. Next squared bulleted point. Some imperative adverbial participles.
No, that he says imperfective, we're
perfected.
using the present.
I'm sorry. Some present adverbial participles require using the keyword while before the ing form. This is called the temporal use of the participle.
Mhm.
Okay.
Let's try it on this example. Let's try using it without the while.
Right.
Passing by, he saw Levi. That's understandable. But while makes it a little bit more clear, I think.
Okay.
And while we're thinking about this one here, while passing by, he saw Levi. The subject of the participle, paragon, is he. And he is nominative singular masculine, and that agrees with the ending omega nu. But it's also connected with the verb saw. Saw is the main verb, and passing by is relative to the main verb.
Can we translate this? Because, I mean, help us out here. Because, okay, it's paragon Aden,
Aiden.
and Aden is what?
Aiden is, he saw, he, she, or it saw.
Right, so there isn't actually present in the sentence.
The subject? No,
Yeah,
it's implied by the
implied.
ending of the verb.
And yeah, and that's what I thought I saw here. So we are actually providing the he in the English. We have
That's
to
right.
have it, but so
Right.
when we look at the participle, what it's modifying isn't actually written down. It's
No.
implied by the verb.
But
Okay.
it couldn't be she
No,
saw,
Yeah,
because
but
the
we
ending
know
is
it
omega
was
nu.
he by the preceding verses, which indicate whom you're talking about.
Yes, we
True,
also
the
know by
context tells you.
Yeah.
But even without the context, hold on a minute.
Yeah.
Even without the context, the omega nu is a masculine
That's true.
singular
Yeah.
ending.
I mean,
No.
but even then, it could have been in theory some other masculine thing that wasn't human,
Okay, yeah,
like a dog.
yeah. Okay, sure. But yeah, to
Yeah,
find
we have
out
to find,
who
we have to
the,
find out what the subject actually is, and we have to.
you'd have to
look-
get the
we have to
context.
find-
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, which you'd
the
find in the
subject.
preceding verse.
Right, but without the context, the omega nu tells you that it has to be a
Yeah, it'd
masculine.
have to be something masculine.
Yeah,
And something with sight.
but please, I want to stress these things here. Please
Okay,
track with me. The participle paragon has a subject of the participle, which has to be the he implied by Aiden.
right.
It also has to be relative to the time of the verb Aiden. And since Aiden is aorist,
Okay,
this occurs at the same time as Aiden, and that's why you use while. You would not use the adverb before or after. It's concurrent with
yeah,
the tense of the main verb. Does that make sense?
that's fine. I mean, I think this is normally how we do English. But really honestly, like you said, if you didn't have the while, there wouldn't be any other way to understand this anyway. Because
If you just use the bare ing form,
the bear passing by.
Yeah.
Either it's totally unrelated or it has to be while he was passing by.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no other way to understand it.
well, you could use the word because, like he suggested.
Oh, well, that would be strange.
And yeah, it would be, but that in certain contexts, because might be, not in this not for this
Well,
verse.
some context might tell you it was what he's providing us a reason he saw him.
Yeah,
Right.
but
Well, the Greek doesn't really tell us that, does it?
no,
We're
but there,
imposing a context into the.
no, we're
sentence.
not.
Well, yeah, because you would.
Right,
have to
the
have
Greek
some
doesn't
other
really tell
context,
us
like-
whether it's while or
I
because.
mean, it could be like responding to a question. How did he know Levi was there?
Because he was passing
something.
by.
Yeah, and that's the
But
context.
then you would, well, okay, but fair enough, and I understand what we're doing, but all I'm trying to point out here is the English allows for the same ambiguity. We tend to remove all ambiguity from our language. But actually, a lot of English has ambiguity,
Oh,
and you
yeah.
have to know the context. And so translating this passing by is very faithful to the Greek. Because the Greek didn't provide that information unless you had the context.
Okay.
Am I right? I mean,
I think you are.
okay, I'm not saying it's a wrong translation, I'm just saying it's not necessary to impose the context in every case where it's possible. The English provides for the same understanding.
Okay,
I
then,
think that's also why Mounts indicated that's just an option if you choose. to do it.
Right, he goes, well, if it fits the
Translator's discretion.
context, right? And I'm
I
thinking,
believe he's got advanced information. He
Yeah.
gives us other options.
I think this is something Drew has pointed out, is that we're trying to turn English into a generative language. A generated
what?
language, what he calls, I think, a generated language, meaning there is no variety in the way you say it. It can be, all English is generated from as if there's a set way to say every single thing. And that's what we're essentially turning this into. and Mounts is sort of following that pattern by when we do these things. But English really wasn't that way and hasn't been that way in the past. People, 5 people or you at different times would say the same thing in a lot of ways.
Sure. Okay. There's all,
I can't think of a language that isn't that like.
Well,
yeah.
there's a tendency
It's
now
just a human
to make English
trait.
standard in the way you say every single thing, like saying we should add the word while here. And I think that's kind of what my resistance is I'm not sure why we're doing this.
You know what, I
Well-
have noted a general tendency too, I think it's part of, and I would say it's not restricted to English, it's a global phenomenon.
Yeah.
And what's done it is predominantly social media. Because it used
oh
to
yeah,
be,
that affects.
because what's going on, if you take a look, pay attention to what you hear a lot of people in this country using English terminology, I mean, British terminology, British accent, British phrases. Now, if you watch anything on YouTube or X or Twitter, what's it called? I can't think of it. Yeah, I hear a lot of that. When I hear stuff in Spanish, I hear a lot of say Venezuelans using Chilean terminology, Ecuadorians using
Okay.
Salvadoran
that's a
terminology. And what's happening is people hear stuff that's recorded from other countries, they like it and they start using it.
Okay, I think that's similar because
And
I
so
think
that's-
what's happening is a lot of cut and paste. People don't write things from scratch much,
No,
even if it's their own, they
Right.
cut and paste it.
Right, and I think what's happening is that's causing all of our regional dialects, accents and terminology to have and begin to merge into one single thing, and that's probably what's creating the standardization Drew is noticing. The
Yeah, I
fact that
don't-
it used to be that
He has a different take on it.
30 years ago, you did not hear so much
Yeah.
of foreign dialects and accents. You hear that every day now.
I'm not, okay.
okay, let's go on. How do you know when to use while,
That's the-
when it fits the context?
Okay.
And then next bullet point, you want to continue?
Sure, I'll keep going. Adverbial participles can have the cause and reason for something. And the key word because may be used. This is called the causal use of the participle. Again, I want to challenge that statement because he just said that the participle itself is giving this, and he's not really saying that. He's saying you got to know by the context.
Okay,
Okay.
Agreed.
I want to be
but
careful.
look at this example.
Yeah, let's go. All right. So Joseph, just the translation, Joseph, because he was righteous, decided to divorce her quietly. Now let's look at
Let's
what is the
first
Greek.
use the bare ing form. Joseph being righteous.
Right.
Own is the participle of Amy.
Yeah.
Joseph being righteous
Decided.
decided, bulethe, to divorce her quietly. There's nothing wrong with doing just the ing form,
In fact, there's translations that say
but
it
if
exactly
you
that
think,
way.
if you think about it,
It's establishing cause and effect.
being righteous, yeah,
Yeah.
because he was righteous. There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, no, it's okay. But again, to say that we don't know that it's causal because you left that out is sort of insulting to everybody's intelligence. Joseph being righteous, there's no
But-
reason for the clause
Right,
except
but
to
he-
describe a reason.
But he doesn't say you have to translate it that way, he's just saying maybe, so he's just saying that's an option.
Well, all right.
And I think it's a good one.
Okay.
I mean, he's really just saying there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Okay, how do you know when to use because? When it fits the context, and I say that it does fit the context.
Okay.
But you could do it with the bare ing form too.
Yeah, that's right. It's not needed.
Mhm.
But if there was confusion that we had to dig hard to understand. I can see why we would want to do this. Because it's possible without the context that it could be while he was righteous. But
You know
that
what-
would be an odd context. And in the context that we have, it doesn't make it time related. It's a state that he is. I mean, when we look in that scripture reference that's here, the context doesn't indicate that he was only righteous for a moment. It was,
No.
Right,
No,
it indicates that was his nature.
yes, which suggests the continuous aspect.
Well, it's continuous either way.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah. Which if you say someone is being righteous, right? Joseph being righteous makes that his nature.
Okay, here's an
Right.
example.
I mean, I'm thinking that's pretty powerful.
Oh, so you're being righteous now.
Yeah. Well, now you made it
yeah.
contextual. but
I
that's-
know,
but that's not.
that gives you
But
an idea.
Here's the thing, by placing now in there, you're making it temporal,
Yeah.
Right.
which eliminating the now removes the temporal aspect of that.
Mhm. Yeah.
When we use the being verb with a what do you call it? Righteous is
That's
as
an adjective. Yeah.
We make that a without it, if you don't add temporal context, you make that a consistent nature.
Mhm.
If you don't explain it some other way.
Yeah.
Which means,
But you can adjust it to make it just a temporary thing. I mean, if you add words, you can adjust the meaning of that, like I just did.
and in some of this sort of says, because he was righteous, he decided to divorce her quietly. If I didn't put the because in there, and I just said Joseph being righteous decided to divorce her quietly, now I've got to actually struggle with this context and think about it. It's telling me he's righteous and he divorced her quietly. There's really a struggle there because the law says he could stone her to death.
Yeah.
And how would that not be righteous? Right?
That was righteous, but it wasn't merciful.
Well, it's forcing me to wonder why now him not stoning her informs me about his righteousness. So without that, because he was, I've put the two things together, and his not stoning her doesn't just flow out of his being righteous. It informs me of what righteousness means.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's actually more powerful than putting the because.
Yeah. Well, you could preach that.
I have.
And you just did.
I have preached this very passage to describe why he was righteous and why this says so and how this informs us about what true righteousness is. But if I just say because he was righteous, he did this, I haven't necessarily, now I've said, well, okay, he's righteous. And I kind of, well, the law must say that.
But I don't think Mounts is saying that using because is superior, he's just saying it's acceptable.
I'm saying if we try to remove every ambiguity from a language, we may take away some things we should examine.
Agreed, and that's what I'm
Okay.
saying.
Here, I wanna-
He's again saying that.
Yeah.
I want to add something to this discussion
Okay,
on this very point. John 8, Jesus was there in the temple and they brought him a woman caught in adultery.
Okay.
They
yeah,
said,
yeah.
they said, the law says you should stone such a person.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you say? Jesus stooped down and wrote on the ground.
Okay.
He didn't answer that. And they kept asking him. So he finally stood up and said, let him who is without sin among you cast the first stone. Then he stooped down again.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a very similar situation because stoning was
It is similar.
the just and righteous command about adultery. And so Jesus was righteous. And
Yeah.
so he
Well, there's several other things wrong in that example that were really egregiously against the law. The indication is that the ones that brought her there were not her husband
Mhm.
or a family member.
Oh, yeah, you're bringing out.
So first of
Yes.
all, they were not following the law.
Yeah,
Second, the man's not present.
yeah,
So again, they broke the law already in 2 counts, trying to claim that the
Yeah.
law says she should be stoned.
but Jesus was the one righteous,
Yes,
and he decided not to impose the penalty,
right.
and he did it in a masterful way.
Yes, he did.
And even though righteousness would have demanded her to be stoned,
Mercy.
it didn't include mercy.
Yeah,
And Jesus said, go and learn what this means. I will have mercy and not sacrifice.
yeah, and it was the place in the law. I mean, this is really good because the place in the law that Joseph saw was that the law provided for mercy,
Mhm.
and he chose mercy, which
Yeah.
is more righteous than demanding.
What does
justice.
James say about
Oh yeah, mercy trumps
triumphs over righteousness?
over right.
Over
judgment.
judgment.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's the word, judgment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I like your word trump.
Triumphs. And
Triumphs and it
his point is,
trumps.
his point is, if we want to see mercy from God, we had better be merciful
Mhm.
to those
Yeah.
who sin against us. That was James's point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the context of that in James says something about it. If you don't show mercy, don't expect
Don't
mercy.
expect it. Yeah, no, I love James.
Yeah. But
yeah.
Well, you
All
find
those-
the same thing, of course, in Matthew 5.
Yeah.
Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
yeah, that's.
Yeah.
But
Okay, well, great.
so
This is good.
there we're talking about in the example of Joseph and how he treated Mary.
Mhm. It
And
flows
he's
from
using
his-
that as an example of where you could use because instead of while,
and it's fine.
and I think it is fine. And I think you could apply the same reasoning to Jesus in John 8, because Jesus is righteous. He chose to be merciful.
Yeah, I don't remember. Yeah, that's fine. I don't remember that in the wording anywhere where there's an example like this, but
No.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the thought,
yeah. No, that's absolutely right. Joseph understood that God desires mercy, not
Yeah.
sacrifice. Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
he was, if he had instead chose to follow the law to the letter, he could have stoned her and still been considered righteous, but he wouldn't have been merciful.
No, and he would not have fulfilled our Savior's birth.
Yeah.
Yeah. The King of Mercy.
These are important things, aren't they?
They are.
Okay, go on.
Okay. As you will see later, there are other uses of the participle and other ways to translate it, but these are sufficient for this chapter.
By the way, I think it would be useful in our translating of participles to consult different translations of a verse,
Yeah.
because I'll bet they handle it differently. And they might use because in a certain case where somebody else would use while.
Hmm.
And it would be instructive to us, I think, to see how other translators do it. Okay, participle morpheme chart. Memorize this chart carefully. Well, it's what he's already presented it, but it's slightly different format. The new tau is the active aorist. What is he talking about? Aorist.
It's not covered in the next chapter, it says, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's all.
Yeah, it's an aside.
Okay. I'm going to skip that. I think we ought to wait till next chapter to look at that. 2714, parsing. when you parse participles, use the ing form and say participle where you normally specify the mood. That's because his chart has that
Right,
column that does double duty.
right, okay.
When listing the meaning of the inflected form, it's best to simply use the ing form of the verb, perhaps with while for imperfect or present participles. Check with your teacher whether you should say present. I would like to use present active participle. And I gave you my parsing code. That's what I've been
Yeah, it's on
using.
your,
It's slightly different arrangement than what he has. But when I do the work on the exercises, I'll use my parsing code arrangement.
Okay,
And if you decide you'd rather use a different form, it's up to you if you want to.
it's contextually understood.
Okay.
Yeah, it's helpful to know what you're doing in your
Mhm.
things, yes.
Check with your teacher whether you should say present active participle. That's what I do.
Yeah.
Or imperfective. Luantes is an imperfect, no, that's a present active participle, nominative plural masculine from luo, meaning loosing. Okay, that's what I, and the exercises here, the parsing section, that's what I've done, but I use his chart in the order that he has it. Master participle chart. Just as there was with indicative verbs, so now you have a master chart for participles, showing how each form is put together. Memorize this with the same care you did master indicative verb chart. The abbreviations TF and CF means tense form or connecting vowel. The far right column shows how all the morphemes fit together in the nominative masculine plural. And he uses nominative masculine plural because there's no confusion with the changes to the vowel produced by contraction. So I'll leave that up to you how you deal with that, but there it is. And he'll build on this as we get more and more under our belt. Now, phrasing is something that he promotes in his book, but I am not going to emphasize it. You can use it if you want to, but I think we've got enough to learn without that. And then the summary just goes back over the same stuff. Vocabulary, we ought to look at it probably. We have a little bit of time. See, do we? No, we're out of time. Okay, I'll have to leave that to you then to look at the vocabulary. And the assignment for next week is to do the first page, the parsing and the warm-up. And then the assignment for the following week is to do the translation of the first 10. We've decided to not impose the second 11 through 20 because of time, but I've done it if you want to look at it.
Okay.
All right, anything else?
I think that, I'm sorry. So we're going to do the workbook, the homework for next week.
Yeah, the homework for next week, the first page. Now,
Just
there
the
is
first
the
page?
advanced information, which he says it's kind of optional, but I think it's important. And at some point, you really ought to read it. Maybe you can come back to it after we do the exercises, but it is good information.
Surprises this far,
Oh,
before
okay.
we finally get to Evangelios.
Before we finally get to what?
Evangelion?
Evangelion?
Evangelion, yeah.
You know, that's,
Things like that, that would have been where he would have been in there a long time ago.
well, maybe so.
In Jerusalem, I mean, it's like,
I think we already.
Okay, let me just quickly go through the vocabulary with you here. Anabino is a compound verb. Ana is a preposition prefix, means up, and bino means to go or proceed. Archaearus is the chief priest or high priest. It's interesting to me that in the law, in the Old Testament, they had one high priest, but in the New Testament, they have chief priest, and he got elected every year. They had departed. The high priest, you know, Aaron was the first high priest, and his was a lifetime ministry.
was that
Right.
because of the fact that the Ark of the Covenant disappeared after the Babylonian captivity, and so since they couldn't
It might have
enter into
had,
the Holy of Holies
No, they still
to do
had.
anything, then
Am I mistaken? I thought that the Ark of the Covenant was still there.
well, put it this way.
That's the
What we
Romans.
know of is both from biblical records and from secular records that the Babylonians and the Romans kept. There are records of the presence of the Ark of the Covenant up until shortly before the Babylonian capture of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar.
Okay.
And it never appears in either any biblical record or any secular record, either by the Babylonians or the Romans,
Okay. Okay.
following that point,
Okay, that's fine.
other than in historic references to things that happened before the fall of Jerusalem.
now, there is a section in Hebrews that talks about the contents of the,
That's referring to a historic context of it prior to its disappearance.
but,
We can
and,
no longer-
and the author of Hebrews says we cannot now speak in particular about it.
Mhm.
And that's possibly because he wrote, no, I'm not gonna,
Yeah,
I better not
understood.
speculate.
Yeah, but we also do know that that the time that Jesus lived, they weren't sprinkling blood on the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant.
Okay, but the reason that,
That comes from Josephus.
okay. Going on, Dexios is right as opposed to left. Duo is the numeral 2.
Surprising.
It is declinable, partially declinable.
Right.
And
As
heteros,
opposed to left, I'm sorry. Right in terms of right hand or right side, not right as in righteousness. Yeah.
Correct,
Okay, sorry.
right.
Duo.
Duo means 2, the numeral 2, and it's partially declined. And heteros is the other word for other. Allos, remember, it's other of a different kind. Heteros is other of the
There's a
same
lot of
kind.
cognates in this one.
Hmm?
There's a lot of cognates in this vocabulary.
Yeah,
Other, wait a minute.
remember the word
Other- Yeah, yeah.
allos?
Allos is the same kind.
No, allos is another of a different kind. Heteros is another of the same
Like
kind.
heterogeneous.
Yeah,
What? But this is saying other, another, different.
Yeah,
Well,
a different one. Of
different,
the same type.
yeah, well, I would suggest not using different.
Yeah.
Allos is
Here we
the
go.
word.
It
So
means-
heteros
It
means
means.
the same kind? That's not
Other
how
of-
we use in
No,
English.
He made
no,
a-
no. No, he means
Okay.
different like this. Suppose my highlighter ran out of ink and I had to grab a different highlighter.
No, I understand what you're
That's-
saying.
But
I
it's
do
a different
understand.
one of the same kind.
Right, that would be why you
Yeah.
would use this.
but-
Okay, because it's our uses in English is backwards, in a sense.
Well, you remember he
Okay.
made
I
a,
mean, it mean, in English, we use hetero to mean things that are not of the same kind.
no,
Well,
a heterosexual
They're not the same sex.
Yeah,
Heterogeneous means it's not all
yeah.
the
I
same.
Did I
guess
get
that's
it
true.
back?
Homogenized milk is
Homogenized
all
milk is
completely
all-
integrated.
It's agreed that it's not being used in the same way the Greek, but the way it's come to mean means things that are not the same
You know what,
in
I
English.
messed up big time. I got it backwards.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, euangelizo is the verb form of euangelion. This is to evangelize or to bring good news or preach.
Okay.
Theoreo is another word for, well, it means I look at or perceive, sometimes used synonymously with blepo or horao. Ierusalima is Jerusalem. Kathemai, that's a deponent verb. It means I sit or sit down or live. Katabino is the opposite of anabino. This is means I go down. And u is, no, this is rough breathing. Who means where. Do not confuse this word with the negation u, which is smooth breathing, or the genitive masculine / neuter relative pronoun, which is who. Oh, I'm sorry. The relative pronoun has a rough breathing, but this, no, that also has a rough breathing. It's hard to see. Yeah, both of those have rough breathing and circumflex.
So what?
Anyway, he says, although it occurs only 23 times in the New Testament, it is so easily confused that I include it here. It's the identical form of the relative pronoun, but it means where. It's an adverb.
A relative pronoun.
Apparently, he's going to use this in the exercises.
So okay, sorry. The relative pronoun is,
Who, what, who or what.
and so this is who. Can mean where.
Yeah,
So they got one word that literally means all of that.
yeah.
Who, what, or where.
Uh,
Is that right?
no, there's tis is the word that means who, what, or why. But the relative pronoun who means the man who went to the
Yeah, the
store.
relative pronoun instead of the interrogative.
Yeah, right.
Okay, but it also can mean
Where, which is an adverb. Let's not get.
Okay, all right. I'm just trying
And
to.
parakaleo, that's a verb form. It means to call to one side, urge, implore, or comfort, or exhort is another word. But remember, we've got the word paraclete,
I was
parakletos.
looking at it, wondering if this is what a paraclete does.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Parakaleo is the verb. Parakletos is the noun, meaning that the comforter, the helper, the advocate. And patho means to persuade. And trace, tria, means it's the numeral 3. You're chuckling about something.
So which is the root? Is it the verb or the, or?
Para is a prefix. It's a preposition meaning alongside or next to. And kaleo means to call alongside.
This, we hear about comfort, but sounds like, I mean, this is a really all-inclusive thing, that would seem like one that's going to come alongside to cause
To
one to
help.
do the right things. I mean, urge, implore, comfort.
Mhm.
Those are aspects of causing me to do what it is that I would have done in the first place, whatever that might be. I
Yeah,
mean, well, otherwise, would I need to be implored?
Well, that would be maybe
quite
if
different
you
than
were
comforting.
thinking of doing something different and you're being
yeah, well,
begged not to do, or to
Yeah,
do something
yeah,
different.
that's quite different than
change.
comforting. I mean, these are aspects of something bigger. than
Yeah.
comfort.
But you ought to look up the various uses of the verb parakaleo and see how they can mean urge or implore.
Right,
or-
I believe that.
other- yeah.
I'm just thinking about how this has been preached. The Holy Spirit is our paraclete,
Mhm.
which is the noun form. But it's one who will comfort, but it's a lot more than comforting.
Oh,
In
yeah.
of course, our experience, we expect the Holy
Mhm.
Spirit to correct us, to convict us when we sin. This is all.
Remember Romans 12:1. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice. That word beseech is parakaleo.
Okay,
So beseech is another way.
yeah, okay.
That's encouraging or even a
It's hard.
softer command.
Mhm.
Implore, which this puts here, that would be
Implore,
really,
yeah.
That's
yeah,
strong,
strong.
I beg you is another way.
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
that's what I was thinking.
I think 2 Corinthians 5, I beg you on Christ's behalf. I think that's the same word.
I'm just curious about where this word comes from and how, because it's such a, we're translating sort of aspects of something, and really it's not any one of those. It's really something else that we're translating into these different aspects of, and it's almost like the aspects of a tutor or instructor or father figure.
Yeah.
I mean, right?
Um,
Parent. These are all aspects of one who has my best interest in mind, who is
Yeah.
greater than I,
yeah.
right?
Um,
My
Yeah.
my master.
yeah. I think, remember in Hebrews, this is similar, not identical, but remember in Hebrews, talking about Melchizedek, Abraham gave tithes to Melchizedek,
Yes.
and it says there, the lesser is blessed by the greater.
Yes.
So the paraclete is the greater,
Yeah.
giving instructions or whatever word you want to use, but he's encouraging or beseeching or urging or exhorting the lesser.
Yeah.
Jesus said, you call me master and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, your master and Lord, have washed your feet, you ought also to wash one another's feet. He's urging or beseeching them when he's doing that. Doesn't use that word, but it's the same idea.
Right,
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. I'm just reflecting on the power and fullness of this word, and
Yeah.
how sometimes it's not really conveyed in some preaching I've heard.
But you can do that though. And
Yeah.
that's why you're learning this language,
Yeah.
to use it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we used our time up. Ray, would you like to close us in prayer?
Heavenly Father, thank you, Lord, for these brothers, and thank you for this time that we've had together. Thank you most of all for being here with us, for enlightening us so that we can understand, because without you, this would make no sense whatsoever to us. Help us, Lord, to be able to use this to further your kingdom. Guard us as we go throughout the rest of this week. Help us, Lord, to obey you and not resist you. Pay attention to our paraclete. Thank you for being our paraclete.
Yes.
And help us, it's your will, to come back together safely this Sunday so that we can worship you again together as a group. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 Boy, haven't Rod's messages been terrific? I mean,
Yes.
they seem to be
Say good
getting
night
better.
to the, I'm gonna, in the recording.
Oh,
Say good night.
good night.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard